I want to bring in Ambassador McFaul. Ambassador, you've been so passionate about all of these witnesses. You and I have talked after Colonel Vindman was smeared, before and after all of these accounts. But I know that today's witness in Fiona Hill, I believe, is one you know quite well. Your thoughts?
I do. Well, I actually know both of the witnesses. David Holmes worked with me in Moscow. But Fiona I've known for about 3 decades. She's an expert on Russia, one of our top experts in the country, written one of the most important books on Putin, better book than I've written about Putin, by the way. And she worked for the president for 2.5 years. I just want to keep underscoring this. This is somebody who's been with the president, with the Trump administration, almost from the very beginning. And I found her testimony very compelling on a couple of fronts. One, completely debunking the notion that Ukraine was interfering in our elections. And remember, when she's debunking that, she's debunking her own former boss, the president of the United States, because that's one of the things he's seeking to be negotiated. And then two, as we've heard from others, but she made it really clear, in that July meeting, when they are pressuring the Ukrainians to say, you must do these investigations in order to get the Oval Office visit. And John Bolton says, I don't want to be part of that drug deal. Fiona doesn't want to be part of that drug deal. And they go to the lawyers. That's a really dramatic thing to do. I worked at the White House for 3 years at the National Security Council. I never once went to the lawyers about any meeting I was in. I think that makes that piece of the case very damning for the President of the United States.
Let's underscore that. Let's play that again and talk about it on the other side.
A specific instruction was that I had to go to the lawyers, to John Eisenberg, our senior counsel for the National Security Council, to basically say, you tell Eisenberg, Ambassador Bolton told me, that I am not part of this whatever drug deal that Mulvaney and Sondland are cooking up.
What did you understand him to mean by the drug deal that Mulvaney and Sondland were cooking up?
I took it to mean investigations for a meeting.
Did you go speak to the lawyers?
I certainly did.
And Ambassador, the way she says, I certainly did, gave me that feeling of, oh God, I would never. Yeah, I worked in a West Wing. She was the kind of person that everyone would have respected. And most people, including a normal president, I can't speak for this one, would have feared a little bit.
I agree with you. And she just made it very clear. It was the use of the public office, one of the most important offices, if not the most important office in the world, by the way, the Oval Office, for private gain, for his re-election effort. It's just clear as day. She said it there. One more thing before, if I lose you guys, one other thing I think demands a little bit more attention, and I hope people will come back to it. There was one other piece in Mr. Holmes' testimony that I thought was really important. When he testified that when Ambassador Bolton was in Ukraine, in those meetings, he was making pretty clear that military assistance, this is late August, will not be lifted until the investigations. Remember, yesterday there was lots of ambiguity about whether these things were linked. That was a very explicit linkage that Mr. Holmes testified to. Of course, it'd be better to have Bolton testify to it, but he was the note taker and he said it. I thought that also was very important.
You know, I keyed up on that too, because what he seemed to do to the Ukrainians was put all the pressure on Warsaw. And you felt for the first time what must have been crushing disappointment for President Zelensky when Donald Trump canceled that trip to Warsaw. It also put Pence back in the middle of it. If Zelensky thought that all of the military aid was riding on whatever impression he made in Warsaw, well, he made that impression on Pence. So whatever was placed on that meeting as being the vital sort of audition for proving that they'd be a good partner, it ended up happening in a meeting that Vice President Pence attended. And if you put that on top of what Sondland said about Vice President Pence's knowledge or awareness of what was being run through the regular channel, which was that Donald Trump was directing an effort that Rudy Giuliani was very much involved in, that Mike Pompeo knew was the stated mission, the stated policy goal, and Pence was aware of it. It was investigations before any commitment to a meeting or military aid, right?
Exactly. And just, I want to get the Ukrainian voice in here just a little bit. Imagine how this feels to President Zelensky. He just won re-election. on an anti-corruption campaign. Massive landslide election. Then his party won a massive landslide election in the parliament. 80% of the deputies, as Mr. Holmes just testified, were thrown out, a place that was known for corruption. They're a brand new start, and now they're being asked to do the very things that we told them you shouldn't do, which is you use your prosecutor general to use the rule of law for political purposes. And now they're being set up to do that. And I just, and again, from a policy point of view, you're sending exactly the opposite message. We heard a lot yesterday about how President Trump really wants to fight corruption. In Ukraine. That was news to me. But if you're really trying to do that, is your first move out of the block with the brand new anti-corruption president and his new parliament to say, I'm pulling back military assistance until you do something corrupt for me? That does not seem like good policy, and obviously it is misconduct on behalf of the president.
See, when you told me that I might lose you, you made me feel greedy with your time. So you go ahead and wave SOS or blink in Morse code if you need to go. But I've got one more for you, Ambassador McFaul. We all sat here talking about how reminiscent Fiona Hill's tone and panic about Russian influence felt to what Mueller's testimony felt like in his most compelling moments. It was actually in a line of questioning from Congressman Will Hurd, who's on this committee, and I'll be watching him today to see if he returns to any of those questions that seemed to be on his mind on July 24th when Mueller testified before this committee. But Fiona Hill, and I think George Kent before her in his testimony last Wednesday, put into the timeline between Donald Trump's congratulatory call with Zelensky and this monkey business, this extortion of investigations and proving oneself before any military aid or a meeting would be committed to, two events: a phone call with Vladimir Putin and a meeting with his ally on the world stage, Orban. What do you make about the fact that here we go again? Here we go again with questions about not just Donald Trump's conduct, not just what appears like extortion, but Donald Trump's loyalties, Donald Trump's orientation on the world stage, which seems to always come back to that which is favorable or advantageous for Vladimir Putin.
First, Nicolle, I'm not leaving you. I'm with you all day long. I thought you were going to leave me. So just to make that clear.
Never.
But to your point, and of course, Fiona's been focused on U.S.-Russia relations for her entire adult life. Very powerful for her to remind everybody about the national security implications involved here. And when the President of the United States says in a call to President Zelensky, you need to look into this CrowdStrike thing, this DNC server thing, that is him repeating Putin propaganda. I want to be clear about that. That is what the Russians have been feeding into our news cycle, into our news media. I just wrote an op-ed about it this week in the Washington Post, reminding people it's not just the stuff they do with trolls and bots. It's they put this stuff into the media, and then our media, usually on the right, then amplifies it. And the President of the United States has been taken by this myth, propagated by Mr. Giuliani, propagated by others, and Fiona Hill was putting down a marker. Folks, we have to stop this. And she was, I think, trying to preempt what might come later in this hearing about somehow, the Ukrainian interference in our election. That is propaganda put out by the Kremlin, and we as a country have to stop amplifying it in our debate as we run up to the 2020 election.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.